I think the loudest grace has probably been protection. When I look back, like all of those pieces, I feel like that, I could say provision and I could say presence. All of those things are true. But the thing that's really that I feel like, wow, thank you, Jesus, is that sense of protection.
Welcome to Quiet Battles, Loud Grace, where hidden wounds meet relentless grace. We have real conversations about faith, burnout, trauma, leadership, and what it means to be human. No fake perfection, no polished answers, just honest conversations and relentless grace. Because sometimes the people helping everyone else are the ones quietly struggling the most.
Well, hey, everybody, we are back with Quiet Battles. I'm Brent, and today I am excited to share with you a guest. It's kind of crazy. It's a little surreal to be sitting here talking to a ghost from the past, sort of. Today I have Mariann Burris with us. She is somebody that I've known literally since, since I was 15, maybe. A bunch of years, several decades. But hey, Mariann, thanks for being here.
Sure. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So we went to high school together.
Mm-hmm.
And that was back in the 90s because I'm
Yes,
old. You may not be old, but I'm old. I'm a little bit older than her. But so we went to high school together. We were in youth group together. We did, we knew each other, but we haven't spoken really in probably 30 years.
Probably.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about social media, obviously, is you kind of keep up with people over the years. So I've kind of watched you from a distance. But for people who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family. Kind of tell us a little bit about your life.
Sure. So Brent's correct. I grew up in DeSoto, Texas, and that's how we met. And met my husband who grew up in Lancaster, and we've been married 28 years. We both graduated from Dallas Baptist University. I took the traditional path. He went back as an adult student. We have two kiddos. Seth is 22 and Ellie is 15. We have two rascally schnauzers. And I am a proud native Texan. I currently work at Texas State Technical College in Williamson County. So we're Hutto hippos. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. You might also say I'm kind of I love Jesus, but I cuss a little type personality.
Same. Okay. So tell us, for those who don't know where Hutto is, tell us where is Hutto, Texas?
Hutto is a suburb of Austin. So if you are driving south towards Austin from Dallas, it's going to be on your east side, kind of borders Round Rock, Georgetown.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And you don't have to go into a lot of detail, but tell us kind of what has been your, for the last 30 years, since I haven't seen you in 30 years, you went to school, you said you went to Dallas Baptist. After that, kind of what was your life like as far as career goes over the years?
Right. So I started teaching. My degree is in elementary education. So I spent 1 year teaching in Irving ISD and my last 7 in South Lake Carroll. So I was a dragon. And then I stayed home for about 1.5 years when Seth was little. And we ended up homeschooling him from 2nd grade through 8th grade, just because of the needs he had and that type of thing. And I started teaching at a university-style school up in the Fort Worth area. So we would go to class 2 days a week. And then Keith was in law enforcement for 14 years. And he felt called to leave law enforcement. He was up in Trophy Club. And he started working for Apartment Life. And that's what moved us to the Austin area. And with that, I ended up also working for Apartment Life remotely for 7 years. And just in January 5th of 2026, I started my journey with Texas State Technical College.
Okay. And can you tell us just very briefly, what is Apartment Life?
So, Apartment Life is a faith based nonprofit that places singles or teens in apartment communities. They even have offsite to host resident events, care for residents, and really just love their neighbors.
Yeah, awesome.
So,
Okay. All right. So, all
yeah.
right. So the title of the podcast is Quiet Battles, Loud Grace, and the way I came up with that title is a lot of times people are dealing with battles that are quiet, struggles that people don't know about, things that people are dealing with behind the scenes, but ultimately God's grace is louder than that. So we're going to get into some of your quiet battles here in a minute, but before we talk about your battles, describe yourself, describe your life as a mom. What was it like in those early years being a mom, having kiddos, starting a family? How would you have described your life back then?
Right. So I kind of, as I was thinking about this question, I was like, oh, yeah, we did have COVID. And so
Right.
there's kind of the pre 2020 mom and the post 2020 mom. So starting out, I was a working mom and Seth went to daycare. So it was doing all the things, right? So it was the teaching, it was the having small group at our house, it was training for a marathon. I actually ran 5 marathons back in
Five
my pre
marathons. Wow.
yes,
Okay.
back in my previous life. And Brent's probably chuckling because I am like zero athletic. Um, so yes, it's crazy.
Well, that's
Um,
impressive. That's impressive. So congrats
well,
on that.
Thank you. But so it was that busy, right? It was blow and go, do all the things. Keith was in law enforcement, so you had the shift work, all of that. Time going out with friends, making time for family. My in-laws lived in Canton at the time, so it was, driving 2 hours with a toddler to Canton for the weekend. It was all the things. And then when I started staying home, we ended up, Seth was in first grade when we had our daughter, Ellie. And at that point, I was already staying home. So I was like, I want to keep staying home. Like, I enjoy this and think it's best for our family. And so, again, doing all the things, homeschooling, small group, friends, family, all the things, all the time. And then just like the rest of the world, right? 2020 hits and everything slows down and everybody, most people kind of reevaluating things. And then as we started creeping back out of the intensity of COVID and as we go into 2021, some of the trauma that our family experienced in 21. So Mariann pre 21 is very different than Mariann after. Now, as a mom, I'm much more intentional with my time. Um, we scaled way back. So now I would say, as a mom, it's much more nuclear and like, just to be real honest, I have not been part of a small group, a women's Bible study, or anything since 2020. And there's probably multiple reasons for that. But if I'm going to spend my time, I'm going to spend it with my kiddos or
Yeah.
doing things that
Yeah.
like fill my cup,
Yeah.
in different ways. That probably sounds bad, like those things that fill my cup, but
No,
you
that
know,
makes total sense
that's
to me. Yeah. Okay. Well, take us back to 2021. So, your COVID is I guess finishing up or still in the middle of COVID, or tell us kind of what happened in 2021 and why was that year so pivotal for you?
right. So in this area, it started out with the snowpocalypse. And then we walked through some things with our daughter. And then our son had started counseling. He was 15 during COVID. He had just kind of found his place in the musical theater. He'd done musical theater since he was little bitty, but being at high school and part of a, big musical production at the high school, and then everything shuts down. So he'd started counseling, um, and then he essentially decided to, take his own life, but I don't know if the right word is failed. It wasn't, you know, he was spared. I don't know what the
Yeah.
right word is.
Yeah.
Um, and so then and I know we'll talk more about that, but you have the after effects of that. Uh, he actually collapsed. He took 100 Benadryl and he collapsed in front of his sister and I. She was 10 at the time. And so that journey, he spent 5 days in ICU. He spent 5 days in inpatient at Dell Children's, and then 5 weeks in outpatient. And mental health is a journey, so he's now 22. We're navigating through the things. And of course, the impact that had on Ellie. And then we ended up through all of this. My grandma, who I was super close to, she had dementia. She fell. She started that decline, went to memory care. We moved. My parents moved down and moved in with us. And then she ended up passing in December of 21. So we're coming out of COVID, and then all these things
Yeah.
um, just kind of just kept stacking on top
Yeah.
of one
Yeah.
another.
Yeah. Well, first, let me say thank you for sharing that and for trusting the audience with that. I know it's probably not fun to talk about. To tell us what was going through your mind in those moments when you saw him collapse.
Well, he is a theater kid. So
Okay,
when so when
enough
he
said.
when he walked into Ellie's room and was like, "Mom, I need help." I was just kind of thinking, like, what happened, and then he collapsed, and I was like, "What did you do?" And he was like, he was able to speak. I took 100 Benadryl, and then I've got my daughter right there, the dog's there, and I immediately run and get Keith, and we, of course, call 911. And I mean, he essentially, because he'd taken so many and had waited, this was closer to midnight. He started taking them around 8 p.m. So it was like, couldn't pump his stomach. Like, it's a miracle. Like, the neurologist, the fact that he has no lasting physical effects. But my thought was, oh my, like, we've lost him. Like, and just fear, disbelief, um, freaking out about how this would impact Ellie. Um, and because, when the EMS arrived, they're working on him in her room.
Yeah.
And so,
And she's 10
Keith,
at the time? Yeah.
she was
Okay.
10. Yeah. And so, Keith, of course, went to the hospital with him. And, that night, Ellie and I just laid together and cried and prayed. And I remember while they were working on him, Keith and I were at the kitchen island, and I was basically almost collapsing. And Keith is very strong, and that's why he made a good good detective in law enforcement, is, cool under pressure, even though, like, internally, right, he's freaking out as well.
Right. Right.
But he
Sure.
just spoke very encouraging words to me, that I really clung to when he was with Seth and I couldn't be there. I needed to be with Ellie. So it was I would when I was trying to think, what was the real, it was a lot of, like, disbelief, like, just shock.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
cannot believe this is happening.
How does something like that change you as a mom?
Mm. Well, I feel like we have always made it a point to talk. And I remember I was teaching and Seth was little. He has ADHD. So a lot of times, right, like, you go into bed, like, that's when his brain, like, wouldn't turn off, and he just talk, 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 talk. And Keith was, again, officer, so shift work. And I just remember being like, I've got to stay, even though I've got papers to grade and dishes to clean, like, let's talk. And so that was one piece of the disbelief, is that he, Seth was feeling so hopeless about certain things that he wasn't communicating it, because we'd had, you know, at least 10 years of being very conversational and open and things like that. And so it made me even more intentional. It changed, again, how I spent my time. We literally, like, when he came home, it was like, we talk about everything. And there have been conversations as, him getting more into his teen years and young adulthood. We've talked about things, and especially different choices he's made, that I never thought, like, if I'd mentioned to my mom,
Right.
it,
Right.
oh my Lord, it would have been better if I'd talked to my grandparents about. But, so it definitely made me more intentional with time, with conversations. And it did, I think, part of me, like, not being part of certain circles and things like that, is probably partly protection, because there's this element of your life that you thought and that you grew up thinking things were going to be like. That's not how it's turned out. So while everybody else is posting pictures of their kids at prom and, all the high school things and all the this and that, that's not your journey. And there is so many, like, cultural norms that don't allow space for people that are struggling through these quiet battles. That's why they're quiet, in my opinion. That's
Right.
why it's quiet, is because I've been very selective with who I've shared the fullness of our story with, because I just don't want to hear it. Like, I don't want to hear, I mean, because there have been people that, well, you should have done this and do that
Right.
and da 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 da. And it's like, like that, thank you, but I really didn't ask your opinion.
Right.
Um, and so I have changed a lot. I'm not as social in the same sense. Keith started volunteering with the youth at church again, and I've just, I guess, kind of kept a bit of a barrier, because some of the quiet battle has been how family, friends, churches have not really walked with us through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sort of a stigma. Would you call it a stigma?
Yeah, I think some of it, they just don't know what to do.
Right. So they do
And
nothing.
so
They
they
don't know
do
what to do, so they
nothing.
do nothing. Right. Yeah.
Right. And I've had, back when we were in North Texas, I've had 3 girlfriends. I've thought about writing a book, but 3 girlfriends that walked through some significant trauma. One lost her husband in our 30s to a blood disorder. One lost a baby at 3 months old due to a heart defect. Another one that lived in Denton, literally, there was a murderer that had planned to take her life, but he miraculously ran off. They were able to catch him. It was a whole thing. And so even though we hadn't talked in years, I called them when this happened, kind of like, hey, guys, this is my trauma, right? Like, this is what happened to me. And I know that they're supportive. And I remember being real close with them during those times, that I learned everybody walks through trauma and grief differently, and that not everybody handles people walking through trauma and grief differently well. Like, you know, and it's kind of like the roaches scatter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of loneliness
Yeah.
and isolation.
Yeah.
Um, that even, now I feel like we've made headway, when it comes to the mental health journey. I don't know if, the generation younger than us and younger will have even more, like, open doors or even more support. But I feel like those of us that are, like, maybe in our parenting, kiddos that, were young teens during COVID and older. I don't know if that's part of it, but that definitely has led to, like, feeling at times like you're fighting alone.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you think that experience affected your family? Did it impact your just your and it had to impact your marriage, it had to impact your daughter. Like when you walk through something like that, it's there's a ripple effect, right? So talk to us a little bit about that.
For sure. So, thankfully, Keith and I truly have become stronger. I We know not to take that for granted. I'm not saying every day we were always in sync and that we didn't have, rubs, against each other at times, but we truly it allowed us to even become closer. And for that, we are very thankful. When there were some other situations with extended family that caused me to put kind of a wall up with some extended family. And when I was telling my doctor about it, I am on Wellbutrin. That's helped because there was some other stuff going on. And so when I was telling her about it, she was like, "How are you not crying?" And she's pretty tough cookie. She was crying. Um, and I was like, "Well, literally, if it wasn't for Keith and Jesus, I don't know. Like, I really don't know with all that we went through in 21." Um, so in that aspect, I feel like it's made us stronger with the kiddos. Um, it has made us stronger, but also Ellie's learning a lot about, choices. And there is, like, I don't know if the right phrase is PTSD, but, when you go through something like that and certain behaviors that have happened, like, I don't know if rage is the right word, but, loud or getting frustrated or all of this, when you hear those things, even this many years later, it's like
Right.
this, like your body, like reacts. So there's this constant kind of, if something happened, like, what's the response going to be? How is this going to go?
Right. Yeah.
Um, maybe some underlying fear of that. And again, it's just, we don't have people to our houses often just because I don't know if the energy's just not there or what. It's just that part is changed. We just aren't as woo, go out and do all the things. We still like to go and try new things and coffee shops and live music and all this stuff, but it looks so much different for us as a family.
Yeah. Yeah. Off camera before we started, we talked a little bit about your daughter as well. I know that when you're a parent and you have more than one child, and one child experiences some sort of trauma, it obviously impacts the other child, and you're trying to give your attention to the child that's kind of in the immediate danger, but then there's impact on the other child. And so parent I tell people all the time, parenting especially now that my kids are older, parenting adults is not for wimps. It's like
Mm-mm.
to me it's much harder to parent older teens and adults than it was to parent little kids. But how do you support your kids through their own trauma while carrying your pain?
That isn't easy. There Yeah, I mean, first of all, single parents amaze me because there have been so many times since 21 where it's divide and conquer,
Right.
because what Ellie has going on that's pretty significant, and then, Sess and being available because you want to keep them talking. Like, you want to keep them talking,
Right. Yeah.
even if it's late at night or
Yeah.
even if you've got something else going on and, like work wise or whatever, or you have to leave a dinner early, or you leave a concert early or a sporting event early, right? Like that plays into it. But um it really has been divide and conquer. If one of us is out of town, it's communication. And really, I guess surprisingly, a lot of times I do not have a good poker face at all. Like virtual meetings, people can tell how I feel. I'm not good at that. However, I feel like with the kiddos, like when they're telling me something that's hard to hear, I'm pretty good about like keeping it calm, because you don't want to scare them off. You don't want to, whatever they're sharing, to make them feel shame. And so really working to be available and kind of cool until that conversation's over, and then you go freak out with Keith later.
Right, right. I tell people all the time, I don't think kids need a perfect parent. They just need a present parent. They just need somebody present to listen. And
Mhm.
one thing I'm learning, ours are 21 and 23. And one thing I'm learning is when they want to talk, just listen, like drop what you're doing, especially for our
Mhm.
son, because boys don't really talk that much, or at least ours doesn't. You have to kind of pull it out of him. So I'm curious too about you personally. Has your
Mhm.
faith, you've kind of referenced a bit like Bible studies and things like that. Has your faith been challenged or strengthened through all of this?
Definitely both. Um, I think, kind of, uh, Brent and I went to, he said, youth group together. So, growing up Southern Baptist Church. And then as Keith and I started serving, not just working, but also serving as an apartment life team, that really was that like paradigm shift of really the relationship with Jesus over the religion aspect. And so I am thankful that we had that journey um many years prior to what happened in 21, because I didn't, this sounds bad, I didn't go to the church, I went to Jesus.
Yeah, that doesn't sound bad.
I I went to because he's the one that's been faithful. I know scripture to be true. I had already been in the Psalms, like leading up to that, and the event with Seth that April. And so, yes, there have been times that it's like, the why yes and all the different things that come with that on the challenge part. Um, and the way that certain um, groups responded to what happened with our family, um, which also led to some of the isolation, you know, um, that that made it hard. And so it really, right, like I had a choice. I could either pull completely away, um, but I knew that I knew that I knew that the Lord had been faithful through all the seasons of my life. So it was okay. I know that to be true. I know that He's faithful. I know that there's this loud grace. So you know what? If that's all I've got, that's all I need. So the church stuff and all of that will just have to figure itself out later, is kind of the stance I've taken.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. Just for the record, I call myself a recovering Southern Baptist. I think the church does a lot of things really well, but at least in the tradition that we grew up in, teaching you how to really, really personalize that faith wasn't necessarily one of them. Or at least that the environment that I grew up in, the household I grew up in, it was more, performance based and instead of relationship based. But so, I think that journey that you're on, I just want to encourage you with that and say, I one of the things that was the biggest curse for me, or the biggest struggle and the biggest blessing, was a couple of years ago. I had literally nothing but Jesus. Like the
Mhm.
career was gone, the church was gone, the friends are gone, everything was gone. but Jesus remained faithful. And so kudos to you for allowing these experiences to draw you closer to him. In that journey, what would you say you've learned about suffering, resilience, hope, that kind of thing that maybe you wouldn't have learned any other way if you hadn't walked through all these things?
Yeah, I think it really is that clinging to Jesus. Like, when you're alone at night and your son's in a mental hospital, I mean, I love me a good whiskey every once in a while, but right, like I'm not going to go down that road. Um, and I just, I mean, suffering's to be expected, right? Like, and with that, can't compare. That has been part of it too. Is the comparison game. And so how do we fight that quiet battle, the what's going on in our mind if we don't fill it with something else? And that leads to, right, like frustration, when you see someone that has been taught coping skills and the different things to do, and maybe they're not, right? Because you know that they can, like, because there's been glimpses of it and stuff, but I really think it is because he's part of the journey was he had, I think it was a devotional or a book about praying dangerous prayers, and he started 21 reading that and had prayed, Lord, break my heart for what breaks yours. And then 21 explodes.
Yeah, it's like, be careful what you pray for.
And so he's looking at it, right, as, wow, I almost lost my son. And just I have to be able to cling to my faith for hope. Like, I really don't know. And that's kind of been how it's been little bits, is talking to friends through the years if they're struggling with like guy stuff and they don't want to hear anything about Christianity. And it's like, well, you know, Jesus, prayer, the Bible, that I don't know what else to give you. Um, Obviously listen and I'm a good friend and all of those things. But I really feel like to truly understand, like where you were mentioning, where when there's nothing else left, then there is Jesus. And I don't know that we would have known that because I've seen how this is played out in Ellie's life. She despite what she's been through, she loves Jesus. She, loves listening to worship music. Um, and I'm like, wow, she has been through some ish, like beyond just, seeing her brother literally almost die in front of her. She's been through some stuff. And she went through a period where she withdrew and got a little, you know, um, dark seems pretty like a severe term, but she was not herself. And so to see her as she, like, from probably about 13 to 15, like that life and that spark and that joy come back, that's also, it gives me hope.
Yeah.
Be- so
Yeah, that's good. And we could probably spend a whole nother episode talking about her, right? Like I think each kid has their own story, and I think it's awesome that you see each of your children individually. What would you say to a parent who is walking through this kind of thing right now? So maybe their child's struggling with a mental health crisis, or maybe their child saw their sibling struggle with a mental health crisis or something like that. What would you say to a parent who's dealing with that?
I think one thing that you just mentioned is no two people are alike, no journey is alike. I think that intentionality, communication, letting go of expectations, there's a grief that comes to this kind of trauma because what you envisioned for your family isn't the way things are playing out. And so that's not to be projected onto the kids. So how are we managing those, I hate to say like unmet expectations or just, what you envisioned, right? Letting that go, well, this is reality. So I can either stay frustrated, mad, get ticked off if, somebody loses their cool or starts showing signs of, decline again or whatever, or I can be present. I can provide a listening ear. I can, just be available. And I think that also includes grace for ourselves and grace for those that we're walking through this with.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, I haven't always handled everything perfectly, with Seth. There's been some really not great responses at times. And so being able to forgive myself and one another, um, because when emotions are heightened, you often say things that you wish you hadn't have said.
Right. Yeah.
And so I really think that communication, intentionality, grace are all super important and not always listening to like those cultural norms. I would maybe even say protect yourself, like find the people because, there's certain people I learned real quick. I can't talk to them about the depth of what is going on in our family. They just can't handle it.
Yeah.
Or I don't want to hear what they have to say. So it might mean setting some boundaries with people that have always been close and present. But when your life takes a turn like this or there's trauma like that, that might, you hear the phrase friends for a season, friends for a reason. That might even include family. And that might be a season that, in my experience, I've had to pull away some.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good stuff. Where do you find hope today? Where do you see hope?
Yeah, I see hope in Ellie. I see hope in I think that you have to, um, in situations like this, the small wins, the small things, because it is a journey, right? Like it's a road that might look straight when you're looking out at it, but what you don't see until you're right up on them are all the bumps and the potholes and the things you need to swerve around along the way. And so really thinking about, okay, that's a win for today. And having, new seasons, hope in finding friends that love Jesus and parent similarly. That has given me some hope, because, again, Keith and I are super close, and it's nice to have a girlfriend, that you can talk to about it, and that's been hopeful.
Yeah. I love that a win for today. Because so often we look at the big picture and we think, like, I can never make it over this hill. I can never make it over this mountain. This valley's too big. And really, a lot of times, and I have to tell people this all the time in sessions, just today. Just think about today. Like, what is the win for today? What do you have to do to get to bedtime tonight? Don't worry about tomorrow. And I love that. Um, I like to end every podcast with this
Mhm.
question. Again, the name of the podcast is Quiet Battles, Loud Grace. So, what would you say God's loudest grace has been in your life? Either your whole life or regarding these particular circumstances that we've talked about right now. What's the loudest grace been?
I think the loudest grace has probably been protection. So when I look back, like to teen years, to young adult years, to my children, to our marriage, all of those pieces, I feel like that, I could say um, provision and I could say presence, all of those things are true. But the thing that's really that I feel like, wow, thank you, Jesus, is that sense of protection. Um, and I feel like that's where I don't want to take that for granted. I know that there's several things, many things throughout my life that my story could be very different from. Um, and and that also is what brings hope, right? Is, me staying home was a step of faith. Us doing apartment life was a step of faith. Us moving to Austin area was a step of faith. And not that all of it was, yeah, sure, we'll jump right in and do that. It's with that protection is, that faithfulness that, okay, we're going to be okay. Even when things are the lowest we feel we can get. I think now that I'm remembering, I think that's what Keith said when we were staying at the kitchen table is we're going to be okay. And in that very specific moment where the EMS is working on your kid, like I remember thinking, are we? But also that bringing me hope in that moment. And that's what I've seen play out.
Mm.
So,
So good.
yeah.
Well, hey, thank you for sharing your story, for trusting me and the audience with your story. I think so often, especially in church cultures, we just don't talk. We don't talk about this kind of stuff. And I have this saying: "What you don't metabolize, you'll metastasize," and you can't heal from what you don't feel. And so, like, talking about it, getting it out there, I just appreciate your transparency and your honesty. If you're listening, it takes a lot of guts and bravery to get on a podcast and talk about this kind of stuff. So, thank you to you. Thank you to your husband, to your kids for allowing you to share your story. And it was awesome to see you after 30 years.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
know.
kind of
Thank you. It's
crazy.
been neat to watch your journey as well. So super proud of all that you're doing and providing a space for people.
Yeah, awesome. Well, if you are listening and you need a little bit of help, please reach out. The Backstage Project is around to help. It's a nonprofit. It's free. We can hook you up with either clinical counseling or coaching or pastoral counseling or whatever you need. But we'd love to help you. Give us a call. Drop us a line, Brent at thebackstageproject.org. And thanks for being here. And we will catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to Quiet Battles, Loud Grace. Quiet Battles is sponsored by the Backstage Project, a nonprofit organization providing hope, support, and resources for ministry leaders, creatives, and others navigating life's difficult seasons. To learn more, get involved, or support the mission, visit thebackstageproject.org. Until then, may you find strength for today's battle and grace for tomorrow's.